Do you love everything football? You've come to the right place. Welcome to Beyond the Touchline, a Football Manager Central podcast with your hosts, Paul, Ryan, and Colin.
What is going on, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Touchline. It is the 9th of the 11th, and we are here. It is myself, it is Colin, it is Ryan, and myself. I am called Paul, which I always forget to say. And we have Matt with us this week in the Football Manager community. He is known as Second Yellow Card. Good evening, sir.
Good evening to you.
Now, normally you come on our shows and I call you Mr. Yellow, Mr. Matt, Mr. Card. Tonight, I'm just going to call you Matt.
Oh, my girlfriend will be so disappointed.
Oh, okay then. Mr. Yellow, let's get into this. So, I think it's only right that we start talking about Fulham Football Club, the club that you love through thick and thick.
Yeah.
So this week, the manager decided to not be there anymore.
I don't think it was his decision, but...
A 5-2 defeat, Matt. Do you want to just talk us through your thoughts on him leaving, and is it the right decision?
It's one of those decisions that, like, it comes along and you think, yeah, okay, fine, I can see why it's happened, but the timing seems a little bit odd. Like, we're not doing that badly. I understand that we obviously have bigger aspirations this year. Obviously, we wanted to challenge for promotion. We've spent a lot of money. But, like... if we were going to get rid of Kit, it needed to be at the end of last season. That way we'd have a new manager in the summer. He could spend what he needed to get his squad right, because we spent some money in the summer, not as much as we did the previous year, but still a reasonable amount. And he could have got his squad in, then we could have really had a challenge. But Kit's not done awfully this year. It's just a bit naive. Like, we were actually going into this weekend, we were the top goal scorers in the championship. We're also one of the worst defences in the championship, which is why our goal difference is still like 1. But, like... there were some positives to the way we played. We were obviously quite entertaining, but we just could not hold a lead for the life of us. I remember watching a game against Charlton at the Valley about a month and a half ago. We were 2-0 up with about 10 minutes left, and we somehow threw it away. But it's not the first time this season, and it certainly won't be the last. And I think perhaps, that tactical naivety, he couldn't change things very well. We could set up to win a game, and if it went well, we'd win the game. But if things went wrong, we had no plan B. And perhaps if we do get another manager in, as far as I know, Kit's first full-time manager job. So maybe it's what we needed. Maybe we needed a change. But the question is, it's all very well sacking the manager, but unless you've got ironclad plans to bring someone of quality in, then it could sometimes make things way, way worse.
I saw a news report that said Nigel Pearson. So it doesn't sound like you have ironclad plans.
I mean, I suppose it is an ironclad plan to some extent. Well, I mean, he's certainly got survival instincts. That man fought off wild dogs in Bulgaria.
The Vladimir Putin of football, huh?
Yeah, indeed.
I think Nigel Pearson would be a big step up to Kit Simmons. I mean, no disrespect to him, but Nigel Pearson's been there and he's done it.
He's got promotion. And he kept Leicester in there. He's a bit of a wild card, though. He has that kind of loose cannon approach. But, like, if we were to get up, he would be one of the hardest managers in the Premier League. I think
it's an interesting one. I have been trying to think. You've got Uwe Rosler's currently unemployed.
Yeah, I did think about that. But, like, Uwe Rosler, to me, like, his stock has probably never been lower. If you look at the amount of jobs he's lost over the past 2 or 3 years, I think he had a lot of success at... I can't remember who he was. He was one team he was in charge of. Was it Brentford he was in charge of?
It was Brentford he was in charge of.
Yeah, he had a lot of success at Brentford. And I think since then, he got jobs off the back of that. And I think his stock has finally fallen to the point where I don't think he will get jobs. He was at Wigan for a bit, was he not? And Leeds as well. I mean, admittedly, Leeds is completely unstable. It's a nuclear bomb waiting to go off, really. But I don't know. I don't think I'd be particularly enthralled if we got Rosler.
Let's pick out the manager list. Who is crap? Leave your comments below. I'm going to start off. I was watching the football this evening. FC United Manchester against Chesterfield. And do you know what? There was one question that bugged me all the way through it. How has Dean Saunders got another job in management? That guy bounces around the leagues, does bad at a club, and then somehow manages to get another job.
Often that seems to be down to more who you know rather than your kind of history. I mean,
it must be. It must be. It was. I just couldn't believe it. I genuinely didn't know he'd gone and got the Chesterfield job. So when he was stood in the dugout, I'm just looking, thinking, he's popped up again. And they talk about giving managers a chance. They can't when these people are just somehow manage to keep getting job after job. I mean, look at
managerial barnacles.
I mean, where's David Moyes going to end up and destroy next?
Well, you got to admit that he's got to have at least some level of hope, knowing that you can pop up all over the place.
It's but I mean, they're moving on. The name I just mentioned, that's happened this week. David Moyes losing his job at Real Sociedad. I mean, it's manager merry-go-round. It's the time of the month. All the clubs are on it. There's so many managers losing jobs. I mean, David Moyes has, I think, it was a 29% win ratio, which is something if we were playing Football Manager we'd be disgraced about, Colin.
Yeah, there was a great article at the beginning of the EPL season on ESPN here that actually the European soccer is, and the management wonder wheel is the only major sport that's more unstable and faster turnover in head coaches than U.S. sports. You know, the NFL here was notorious for years where, if you weren't winning after, a season or 2 seasons, they'd throw you out, or, the average career was like 3 years in management. And then you go and look at it, it's like, well, Moyes went a little over a year again. Good job.
It's just crazy. I mean, we can continue. We can stay in America, Colin. New York City FC. In the same week that New York turned red. Congratulations, obviously, to yourself, Colin. We say every single week, season ticket holder at the Red Bulls. You've had an eventful week, and then you've also got to watch New York City FC replace the manager with somebody with no experience.
Yeah, I think this is a very big case of big dollars in Man City that don't understand the league that they're playing in. Now, I don't want to take anything away from Vieira, and perhaps he'll surprise me and be fantastic, but you see people all over the place, right? The rules and nuances to MLS dictate how hard it is to be good, right? So the whole name of the game is the salary cap, and that's totally there to provide a tremendous amount of parity in the league so that the bottom and the top stay tight and you get good competitive games week in and week out, and you get a lot of diversity year to year, and you don't end up with the same sort of powerhouses and things like that sort of dominate the European and South American football landscapes. Moving in Vieira, who has no experience at he doesn't like a guy in the Man City under-21s, that kid is gone. You can't really do that in MLS. You're going to turn around and go to the club and say, yeah, I got to get rid of this guy. It's like, yep, he's on a 3-year guarantee. So you can either have a hole and one less guy on the squad, or you can put up with him. So you end up needing, you're almost by virtue of the way the system is structured, forced into really picking players and having to develop them. And if you run into a challenge developing them, guess what? You're going to need to figure out how to develop them, because you really can't replace them. There is no room in the way that the cap structure works. So I'm really not sure how in the world he's going to handle that, because there are some duds there. There are some, woefully underperforming players that are in the back line that are on some longer-term guarantees. So now you're stuck with it. You're going to have to figure out how to get them to play. And Man City's firing notice, which conspicuously did not include the general manager from New York City FC, Claudio Reyna, in the statement, basically fired Christ because he couldn't he didn't have a good development strategy. I'm really not sure the next guy in is going to get a better one when the answer is, congratulations, here's your starting 23, figure out how to make them play.
Well, I mean, I don't know about yourself, Matt, but when you look at the likes of Lampard and Pirlo in the middle, albeit Pirlo's getting on a bit, you've got Villa up front. I mean, them three alone should at least guarantee something.
I think it guarantees bums on seats and names on shirts, but I don't think it's not necessarily conducive to long-term success. I think, yeah, okay, you're going to have young players that could learn a lot from them, but it's whether they're actually wanting to learn.
I think that's true as well. I mean, it's the attitude of them, isn't it? I mean, we'll move over to another manager who could be losing his job, and we'll go to Ryan for this. We'll bring him in for his first input of this evening. Ryan, we're just talking about Gary Monk now at Swansea. There's rumours he could lose his job. I mean, if he loses his job, I'm losing all faith in stability.
Yeah, stability in football is not something that's highly held at the moment. It would be very unfortunate if he's sacked by Swansea. The work he has done there, they're not on the best of runs. Let's face that, but he's a good manager and he can turn it around. You've just got to have a little bit of faith, give him a little bit of time. But time doesn't seem to be of the essence in football. It's either a bad run of results, oh no, let's get the next man in and find who can fix this bad form that we're under.
There you go. There's some input from the man in the know, Ryan. There. What I will say is we can obviously speak to Mr. Yellow, who's currently managing Wales, and obviously he must have some contacts in Swansea to maybe have a word with them.
I think Gary Monk is actually still the Swansea manager on my Wales save. So if that's anything to go by, then perhaps he's going to be there a lot longer than we would perhaps imagine at this current time.
Well, I mean, we were hoping you could give us some inside information, but...
I'll talk to my fictional board.
Thanks. Do you know what? There's one of the Premier League games I want to just talk about quickly, which was... the Saturday's games. I'll just quickly run through them. It was Bournemouth 0, Newcastle 1, which we're going to come back to. Leicester 2, Watford 1, Man United 2, West Brom 0, which we will come back to as well. Norwich 1, Swansea 0, which we just mentioned. Obviously, Gary Monk possibly losing his job, which is insane. Sunderland 0, Southampton 1. It gets worse for them, losers. West Ham United 1, Everton 1. Stoke City 1, Chelsea 0. Colin, is he gonna go?
So the rumors I've been looking out for it. So last week the rumors that were being reported here in the U.S. was that Chelsea was going to eat the £37 million payoff if the two games this week didn't work out. So clearly the game at the weekend didn't work out. I don't know if you watched the midweek Champions League game. They won, okay, but I don't think it was convincing. Is it enough to leave Jose out there? I don't know. If it was up to me, he seems to be self-destructing that club. I don't know what mental, shift he's had, but everything seems to be this weird, elaborate sort of mind game that he plays, and harassing referees and freaking out all over the place, and BS press conferences for the good of the club. This is one of those times where if you ever expected to see one of those FM "You're Ruining Squad" harmony screens, this would be now when you got it. I think for the good of, if it was up to me, for the good of the club, I would say, look, boot it. I think looking at it, they're 15th. I think Newcastle's a point behind them.
Right.
And in any other day, I'd say it would be pretty wild to say that Newcastle was a point behind Chelsea, but now it's just kind of sad for everybody.
Shows how bad we are.
But it is, right? I mean, it's just sad that in, conversation after conversation, they're mired at the bottom of the table, and there's just way too much talent. It's not. There's no way you could say it's a skill thing. It's not that John Terry got 3 months older, that they all of a sudden got this terrible. Something is broken upstairs in that club, and you know what? I say move them on, and anybody. I'm pretty sure you could put a stuffed animal up front right now and it would have a more calming effect on that club.
What I will say, Colin, is I just want to quickly point out that Colin's views on John Terry are his own and not from Beyond the Touchline, so please, Terry, don't start criticising us in press conferences. I can't be done with the abuse. If you have to go savage, I mean, my low league caps are going to get abused to hell. I think we'll stay away from John Terry because he's an angry man. I think Chelsea have been shocking. I mean, they could send Falcao back to Monaco. They'll probably save enough money to pay Mourinho off the money that guy's on. Costa's just not doing it at the minute, is he? I mean,
at least he didn't get a red card, dude.
Yeah, that's true. Matt, do you want Costa?
Costa, he just, admittedly, he hasn't had a red card, but he seemed to spend most of the game against Stoke trying to wind up Ryan Shawcross. And I know they've got history, but, if he's more interested in that than actually trying to score a goal, and it showed, then what chance have he got? I really think that if they'd have gone with Remy up top from the start of that game, then they may well have actually had a decent chance at winning it, because Remy was pretty solid when he came on.
I think Ryan, I'm just going to go to you for the question to end this discussion. Would you rather have Costa in your team or a Costa coffee in your hand?
Costa coffee in my hand. Teacher's dream.
Fantastic. Brilliant. There you go. Everyone else is thinking, yeah, I'd go for the coffee too. The next game we'll talk about is Bournemouth 0, Newcastle 1. Now, I upset someone on Twitter during this game, and he genuinely took the whole conversation out of context and decided to storm off. Joshua King for Bournemouth was the reason they lost this game. They had numerous chances, and every time he gets called up to the Norwegian squad, the Norwegian press over here are not fans of him. I'm not a fan of him. Whenever you see him play, when he plays for Norway, his end product is just not good enough. He had some really nice movements, some really nice dribbles, but then when it gets to the final product, he just kept ballsing it up. Bournemouth completely got FM'd. If I was managing Bournemouth on Football Manager, my screen would have been punched. Oh my days. Newcastle... Oh, bear in mind that myself and Colin are both Newcastle fans. Sitting watching Newcastle play Bournemouth was like going to the dentist. They were shocking. Matt, if you think you've got it bad...
We do. Try being in the Championship.
Do you know what? I'd take we might win some more games.
You think that, but no.
Hey, when Newcastle dropped into the Championship, it was one of the best seasons I've had watching them.
I was hoping Fulham would do something just like that, but yeah, that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, it didn't go too well.
But like coming back to Josh King, he signed for Bournemouth from Blackburn, what, did he not?
He did.
And I was a little bit surprised, because I've only seen Josh King play a couple of times when he was at Blackburn. I believe he also played against England in a friendly pre-World Cup.
He did.
And frankly, I couldn't see what all the fuss was about. It almost feels like he genuinely was called up to the Norwegian squad, almost because he has an English-sounding name. I know that sounds incredibly strange, but I just couldn't see why he was a Norwegian international over perhaps another Norwegian striker.
I can tell you why now. He was called up to the Norwegian squad originally because he came through with Man United. He was then called up to the Norwegian squad because he was still playing in one of the top levels in England. That was literally it. The response, why have you called him up? Because he plays in England. Yes, but he's not scoring any goals. Yeah, but he plays in England. It's like, what?
You'd be better off calling up, the top scorer from the Tippelation or
well, this is the issue at the minute with Norwegian football. The Norwegian national squad is going to be amazing. I predict in the next 5 to 10 years, the Norwegian national team will be in the top 10. In 2013, we got to the final of the under-21s. We missed out on the whole competition this year, but that was mainly due to poor management.
It's interesting you say that, actually, because in my Wales save, I'm at the Euros at the moment, and this isn't a spoiler because obviously Wales were never going to win it, but what I can say is that Norway do.
Wow.
And that's what, 2020?
The unbelievable. I mean, what I find fantastic, we spoke about it this week, just going to the Football Manager side of things for a second. Last year, I gave James from the WizKids, Tobias Svensson's information and stats. And I said, this kid's not in the game, but you need to add him. He's been playing for Mulder's youth team, and he is awesome. FM16 comes out, and he's in the game. It was like... Yep, I predicted it.
Wasn't he old enough to be in the game before?
He wouldn't. He would have been 14. But if he got permission from the parents, he would have been able to go in it.
Well, like they did with Ødegaard.
Yes, basically, and like they did with Krista Ayer.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, you go through all of them. I mean, you've got Christopher Ayer at Start, who's one of the best youngsters in Norway. You've got Martin Ødegaard. You've got Sander Svensson, who is looking so good for Molde. He's playing more games now. But the point we were discussing, you said, why don't they call up one of the top goal scorers in the Tippeligaen? The issue there is Sørland. I always struggle to pronounce his name. He is one of the top scorers in the division. But I think it's in like 24 caps for Norway. I think he's only scored like one goal.
You can't translate it to scoring at the very top level.
So, to that extent, I'm almost like, yeah, I understand that that's why you've maybe looked at other players. But then you've got Berisha, who used to play for my local side Viking. He's now playing in Germany for Firth. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah, Greuther Fürth.
Yeah, he's playing there. And maybe he should be given a chance.
Hasn't he got a brother? Because isn't it like Bessart Berisha and there's another one called Vetton Berisha?
He is. He's playing for Red Bull Salzburg.
That's right.
See, look at we wouldn't have this knowledge without Football Manager. When I moved to Norway, I was like, yep, I know him. But I genuinely think Norway's got a lot of a very bright future ahead. We've got some fantastic talent coming through at the minute. Like I said, the under-21s shocked the whole of Europe getting to the final a couple of years ago. And I just think once they develop and Martin Odegaard starts getting more football elsewhere, I mean, Odegaard's one of the best players, obviously, around in my opinion at the minute. When he plays for Norway, he played in the last international. He came on off the bench, and he was a class above everybody. But because he's not playing for the club, the manager's refusing to start him.
But it is good to see that when he does play for his country, he's not just that kind of flash in the pan that was very highly rated, but now he's starting to fade away. And we've seen a lot of that with these so-called wonder kids in the past. But it sounds to me like that is not the case. But do you think that if Norway were to, realise the potential of these sort of youth players, do you think that firstly, obviously it would benefit the national team to some extent, provided they had a decent coach to go with it, but do you think it would also benefit the actual league itself, or would they simply just go abroad and then the league itself would still sort of never be able to reach any kind of real potential? Because I remember a few years ago, Rosenborg were almost always a Champions League group stage team, and lately they've been nowhere to be seen, and it's basically just been Malmö that have been the sort of Scandinavian representatives.
I think,
although that's not this year either, because I believe it was Norrköping that won the Allsvenskan this year.
Well, I mean, next season you're going to see Rosenborg back in the Champions League because they've won the title this year. So they've kind of come out of nowhere and dominated again. But that's
stay back in the Europa too.
Yeah, exactly. After the American manager Bradley got them there.
Little Bob Bradley shout out.
But the issue I think with the league this year was Mulder just never turned up. But as soon as Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has come back, they have looked unbelievable. He's come in and he's literally said, right, this is how we played last time. I'm going to play as many people as I can who were with me last time, and he's integrated a few kids in with it. And, they look so good.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but when Solskjaer was at Mulder the first time, did he or did he not win them their first ever league title?
He did. They were... A lot of people, like, when you talk to them about Norwegian football, they think Molde was one of the powerhouses of Norway. They're not. They've only just recently come up. Solskjaer was born in Kristiansand, right next to Molde. So he obviously came through the academy. And that's why he decided to manage them. When they offered him the chance, he obviously couldn't turn it down, and he just turned them into something special. They had some fantastic players, and unfortunately a lot of them have moved on, but there's still some fantastic talent there. So, and as we've said, you've got Sander Svensson, he'll be now 18. He's looked fantastic this season, and he's only going to get better. You've got Tobias Svensson, who's now 16, who is he's going to be in the first team next year, I think. And it's some exciting times, and I think talking about players leaving when they get to a certain time, I think it's going to happen for a few years yet, Matt. I think, as you said, it just happens, doesn't it? With this level of league, the players have to move on to better themselves. But there is better talent coming from the likes of Africa. There's a couple of players come to Viking who are fantastic talents, who have come because they recognise Norway as a better stepping stone than it was.
Do you think that... Sorry.
No, go on.
Do you think that, obviously Norway, you say that they've got these sort of these wonder kids, and I'm sure obviously you know a lot more about Norwegian football than I do. But do you think that it is just Norway, or is there sort of a resurgence of youth talent being produced just across Scandinavia in general? Like, for example, at Göteborg they've got a youngster called Gustav Engvall, who is very highly rated, and it looks like he could be a sort of Swedish international at some point. And he's sort of all I really know about. And I know Malmö have got a few players along that sort of line as well. Do you think there could be like a new golden age for Scandinavian players? Because of course, in the past, Scandinavia has produced some ridiculously good teams and have been at World Cups and European qualifying campaigns. Obviously, Denmark won the Euros. So, but do you think that we may be returning to a sort of a new era for Scandinavian football if these guys are nurtured in the right way?
I think in terms of the whole of Scandinavia, I don't want to comment too much because my knowledge isn't good enough, unfortunately. I do try to follow as much Norwegian football, and as I've said, I watch some youth football when I can, when it's on TV over here. But in terms of Swedish, Danish and Icelandic, I don't really see much of it. There's a couple of youngsters in Finland. I'm not even going to try to attempt the names. But
oh, you mean Pojan Palo?
No, he's now at Leverkusen, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I know he's very highly rated.
He's somebody who I could technically talk about Sweden and Denmark quite a lot, but it's literally all Football Manager knowledge. Where my Norwegian knowledge is off actually watching it. So I feel like that's more valuable. I'm not too sure, unfortunately, on the other countries. What I will say is the quality in Norway is dropping deeper and deeper. My local side in the third tier plays some football which would not be amiss in any division in Europe. It's beautiful. They missed out on promotion by 3 points, but the football they played was just outstanding.
I think that's because they're actually trying to play football rather than just sort of clogging it. Like, I think England's lower leagues have got a reputation for being a little bit sort of cloggy.
I think what's happened is obviously Norway's famous for the bad weather. And it's famous that the league runs from April till the end of October, beginning of November, because the league campaign's literally just finished. But one thing they have done now is most clubs have a artificial pitch as well as the real pitch. So as soon as the pitch is slightly like bobbly or just doesn't look perfect, and bear in mind, at the third tier of Norwegian football, this was where I was going to watch, the pitch was literally like a skating ring. If it was in the slightest bit off, they would move the game onto the artificial pitch next to it. And they had just like standing area around it, and maybe limited the support from maybe 1,000 to 500, but the quality of the game was still of a high standard, and that's happening across Norway. There's so many artificial pitches getting built, so many new training areas getting built from the councils, which is nice to see. And it's just they actually putting money into grassroots football, which I think England could definitely take a leaf out of.
I know for a fact that in Iceland, about 10 years ago, I believe, there was a whole new initiative put in where I think every single school in Iceland has a heated football pitch or something along those lines, or an artificial turf, and we are finally starting to see that kind of grassroots investment where they've really taken it. Obviously, Iceland's a smaller country; it's only got about 450,000 people, but when you look at the performance that they've put in, and this is not exactly this isn't a flash in the pan thing. Iceland have been threatening to do this for the last couple of qualification campaigns. They had some really interesting results in the last round for the World Cup, but they've really taken that by the horns this time, and have just absolutely wiped out that group. And they've got to be the most overachieving nation in world football. But I don't know if you've ever read the book Soccernomics, but it talked about this sort of thing quite a few years ago in relation to countries like Iceland, with the potential that they actually have for this kind of thing, because of the fact that I believe on any given match day in Iceland, like 12% of the population are at a football match, which is just outrageous.
Yeah, it's something that I found has been incredibly depressing when you start talking about like the U.S. youth system, right? So you have a country like Iceland, it's 450,000 people, that produces a team that's moving like a wrecking ball through European qualifying. We've got a nation of 300,000, and our upcoming picks of 23 guys to go into the next qualifying campaign is a nerve-wracking experience. And if we can find 23 guys coming through, I wanted to tip off. You had an interesting point talking about the quality of African football players and sort of moving to different leagues. I think there's been an interesting spot. So, for a U.S. call-up, so Darlington Nagbe, who plays for the Portland Timbers, who's Liberian by birth, just got his U.S. citizenship, and coincidentally a week later his first U.S. national call-up. And then there's another forward for the Vancouver Whitecaps, Kakuna Mane, who's I think Gambian, who's due for his citizenship for the U.S. sometime next year. So I think it's an interesting strategy from U.S. soccer to recognize a lot of the quality coming out of Africa as a footballing nation, or continent rather, and footballing nations there, to try and sap some of their higher quality players into into MLS and then B into our U.S. national system. But on the other side, it's a little sad to me in that, like you said, we're a nation of 300 million people, and we're borrowing. We're borrowing effectively.
Sorry, go on, Matt.
Would you say that that's partly because of, you have, for a start, with 300 million people, you're a nation of incredible athletes, and that's proven by, particularly the NFL, probably one of the most athletic sports, out of these sort of major American sports. I think that's the one that requires the sort of most aerobic fitness, I suppose. But would you say that, like, one of the problems, I suppose, one of the problems with players coming through in the States is that often, if they are athletic, in that sense, they're sort of shoehorned into becoming footballers rather than soccer players. So I remember hearing a lot about, DeAndre Edlin, who I believe is on loan at Sunderland from Spurs now, but I believe he used to play for the Sounders. He was like one of the first players that chose soccer over football. And if more players were given that choice and actually chose that, do you think that would have a huge impact on the state of the US men's national team?
Yeah, I think there's two sort of huge problems. I think one is exactly that, is that if you're an athlete and you're, 9, 10, 11, 12 in that neighborhood, you're going to be pushed into baseball or football. If you're a little more muscular and built, chances are you're going to get pushed into football. Or if you've had good little league, you can throw a ball pretty hard. Good arm strength, you're going to get shoehorned into baseball. If your soccer's third, fourth, fifth level down.
After hockey.
So I think, it's after hockey and basketball, unfortunately. It's coming, it's rising, it's getting better, which I think leads you into the second problem in U.S., at least in soccer in the U.S., is it has to do with the whole youth system. It's effectively a pay-to-play youth system. So you're looking at an issue where, you're a parent, you've got a 10-year-old, you want to play, at a traveling club level, which is, sort of those first tiers where academy systems are going to be looking and recognizing. You're talking about thousands of dollars a year that you're going to invest into playing, where, if a Barcelona, a Man City, somebody else like that thinks you have talent, right, you're not footing those kind of bills to get in and play with them.
That's interesting.
But I mean, it's a huge issue with the U.S. system in that, and, you'll hear guys, listen to the radio. We have former U.S. internationals who are sitting there talking about, I've got, paying to have their kids playing in, youth academies. And you're sitting here looking at it going, okay, these are, kids of big U.S. internationals. So, you would have even assumed that, clubs and club level stuff would have said, hey, even to put another butt in the seat to say, so-and-so's kid plays for our academy. But even that, you're paying, and then you're traveling all over the place with them. It's hotels, it's things like that. So not only just paying for a slot in the academy system, just to get a shot at discovery. I mean, most of these, you're getting kids in here paying, thousands of dollars. Parents paying thousands of dollars a year to try and get your kid into the, by age, 15, 16, or 14, 15 in there, like the discovery for U.S. soccer to get them on the radar. You have a lot of kids, they talk a lot about, how underrepresented certain minorities are in U.S. soccer. I think FC Dallas is a perfect example of sort of the Latin American, the Mexican American and Central American influence that our U.S. team should be dying for. I mean, there's tons of phenomenal kids playing down there, but given socioeconomic circumstances in this country, they don't come from backgrounds that have $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 of spare money to toss on to trying to get these kids recognized that are fantastic talents. And Liga MX, if for people who don't watch, I mean, Liga MX is really high level, high quality football. I mean, there's a reason why Mexico dominates CONCACAF, and they have a great league structure and fantastic teams. And they have a great, rich footballing history, and it moves over the border into California, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, and we just don't seem to really be able to leverage it with sort of the youth system that we have in this country.
Also, it's actually, that brings me on to quite an interesting point as well, and I was just thinking about this while you were saying that, and it's quite salient, is that I would probably say that sort of 80% of professional footballers probably come from less than middle class backgrounds, shall we say. Like when you listen to them talk and where they're from, and their upbringing is generally one of not poverty, but sometimes it is poverty, but sometimes it's certainly they weren't brought up with money a lot of the time. There's obviously a few that are the exceptions to that, but this sort of proves it. Well, not proves, but it goes into that same sort of line that these players that can't afford that usually, for example, in Brazil, a lot of the reason Brazil was so good is because players got good to fight their way out of poverty, and that was sort of the old saying, so to speak. But if players in the States physically cannot do that, then there's so much talent that is being washed under the carpet by money, basically. And that is an absolutely ludicrous way to run a youth system. And with 300 million people, particularly the Hispanic communities and even, the black communities, the African-American communities, there's huge amounts of players I'm certain would be brilliant players or want to play soccer, but they just can't. And I think if they tapped into that a lot more with, free youth academies, I don't know why they should have to pay anyway, but, if these clubs really want to improve, then they would invest in the... Not only that, but in particular places like Dallas or LA or any city or state in the States with a high Hispanic or African-American population, people... in South America are absolutely nuts about sports. So if they could tap into that as a fan base as well, then in theory the sort of viewing figures for the MLS would improve as well. Particularly as they saw some of their own compatriots actually playing and making their way in through it.
Oh, absolutely. I think the CONCACAF playoff in October in California, right? That stadium was, they played it at the Rose Bowl, so it was 100,000 people, and I'll bet you it was 80% Mexico and supporting Mexico. Dallas last night in the playoff game. I mean, they had the goalkeeper, U20. He's a U20 Mexican international right now. Absolutely fantastic kid. You get these, there is a bigger support. I mean, that stadium was jammed to the hilt and going crazy for a team that is largely homegrown, a lot of youth coming through their academy, their system. They're doing great things with the team. The coach, Oscar Peralta, who's the manager down there, is doing some fantastic stuff with pushing homegrown players, and it's turning into a real product. Now, the issue is how do you, okay, so one MLS club is figuring it out and able to tap into it and trying to bring them in, but how do you get this into a bigger national, conversation? And how do you get U.S. soccer to do something about it, to pull a bigger, broader, pull through? I think, some of the youth coming out, Matt Miazga who's a fantastic defender for the Red Bulls, who just got his first national team call up. He came through the Red Bulls Academy, which is, he came from it's a New Jersey piece. It's a developed thing, but it's a bigger money operation. The East Coast is a higher dollar area. There's more opportunity. There's more clubs. I think U.S. soccer really needs to start looking into the rest of the country and where to kind of, either subsidizing MLS or something to help with kind of attracting more people into these academies and more of these underrepresented groups into the academy systems. Because I think you're exactly right. There's a lot of kids who aren't going to be football players or baseball players, but who are incredibly athletic and just want opportunity, and they're absolutely ripe for the picking.
It's interesting as well. I know you say that it's more of an East Coast thing. That's where most of the clubs, and I have looked at sort of an MLS map, and you're right, it is sort of predominantly there, but some of these sort of most hardcore fan bases, obviously I can't speak to this particularly as I don't follow the MLS that closely, but when you sort of look at it from an outsider's point of view, it seems like the most sort of hardcore and more European style fan bases seem to be up in the sort of the Northwest, up in Seattle and Portland and Vancouver. Which is strange because that sort of goes against where you think it would be almost in a way. But they seem to have taken to it a bit more and adopted that kind of European style of fandom, so to speak, with the tifos and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot more history on those clubs. So I think, something like the Red Bulls, which I'm at, okay, so we started 20 years ago in MLS as the Metro Stars and have a decent history. But compared to like the Timbers, who have been playing, they were a USL or an NAS, I think it was a USL team in the 70s. And the whole Timbers Army and cutting the logs after the goal. I mean, there's a well-established tradition in history, and it's fantastic. I was actually a little disappointed that Seattle couldn't pull off the win last night because I was talking about it on Twitter, and I was telling a lot of people that a Seattle-Portland Western Conference final would be absolutely out of control. Probably some of the best fan and atmosphere that you could possibly watch. I think Columbus is a big blue collar town. It's a pretty big support for the Crew. But I think the Columbus, even now, Dallas and Portland is going to be, I think, fantastic environments compared to Washington or New York and Columbus, which I think is going to be a little bit more subdued in it. But absolutely right. The Cascadia Cups between with Vancouver, Seattle, and Portland in there is amazing atmosphere. Kansas City and Sporting Kansas City is probably one of the best in the country. That stadium is bouncing all the time in there. So it would be great to see if they could get them pulled in more.
I heard a lot about Christ, who was it? I've literally forgotten it. It was on the tip of my tongue, and now it is gone. No, it's gone.
I was just going to say, just to kind of jump in, just kind of review this the topic we were talking about there. I just want to obviously we start off by talking about the quality that's come through the Norwegian system at the minute. Now in 2014, Colin, there was the number reported was 318.9 million people in the US. 53.01 million in England, and 5 million in Norway. Now that is a massive difference. 5 million compared to 53 and 318. That's an insane amount. Then when you look at, there's possibly 5 or 6 players at the age of 16, then there's another 4 or 5 at 17, 4 or 5 at 18 currently in the Norwegian system who all could become national team players. There is not that in England and in America at the minute. And I just think that is, it's insane. And do you think that's something to do with the fact that if I wanted now, I can walk out of my back door, walk to my local club's artificial pitch and play on it? There's no restriction, there's no blocking, there's no nothing. If Matt wants to go out, he's going to have to clean all the dog poo off the local field. He's going to have to find some sort of net to put up.
Put the goalposts in. And Colin, I don't know what your situation's like. How accessible is it to go and play football on a decent surface?
So, I mean, you're not going to have great pristine pieces. I think there's plenty of good surfaces. But I think Matt captured it right? So if you're reasonably athletic and you're looking for something to sport to, even my age, right? The first place you're going to end up is probably like you're playing like rec league baseball, rec league softball. You're probably not playing football because by the time you get to 30, your body has had enough of that fun. But your first choice is your first choice is other sports. From where I am now, I'm probably stone's throw to 2 or 3 football fields and a dozen, little league parks and 1 or 2 decent soccer fields. But the soccer fields here are used more for cricket than they are for soccer on some days.
So I think I genuinely think, looking at that is one of the major factors. And Matt, you will know that in England it is always shouted about that they need to invest in grassroots football. Yeah. Now, it's the fact that in every single town I go to, in Beaumont, the village I live in is tiny, and I'm talking hundreds, not thousands. And yet behind me is a pristine, full-size football pitch. Then next to that is the artificial pitch, again full-sized. And in Egerton, in Brina, who are in the second tier of Norwegian football, they've got the pitch, the stadium. Then next to that, the artificial pitches. There's 2 side by side. Again, not locked, not closed. Anyone can go in, play football any time of the day. Same with training with the clubs. You literally just can turn up and say, can you give me a chance? And I think that's helping towards the development of football because the kids are going to play. They playing football on the artificial pitch while the actual team's training on the real pitch. Then players are getting picked out. That's how a couple of the players are being found. They were actually spotted just playing football with their friends. And I think it's something which I think the world needs to start doing. And I don't know, Matt, because I don't want to sound harsh on England, but I think one of the biggest issues is they would just get vandalised.
Well, I mean, I kind of agree to some extent. It's just like, I think there's like almost like there's a higher barrier to entry in football in this country. It's put on a pedestal the way that obviously people go and they play with the mates in the Sunday league, but it just feels like it almost has to be a little bit too organised, if that makes sense. Like you were saying, in Norway you could just go over to the artificial pitch with your mates and play, whereas in this country that seems to be less and less happening now. When I'm like out and about, I very rarely see just kids playing football anymore.
Because you got to book the pitch, and then you can only play for an hour.
Well, it's not always the case. I mean, like where I live, there's like you were saying about you live in a town with hundreds. There's maybe 2,000 people live where I live, and there is obviously the school, but that obviously you couldn't use that if you wanted to. There is a recreation field which, as I said, doesn't have, unless it's football season, doesn't have nets or even a goal frame most of the time. So you'd have to sort of put it up yourself or bring your own stuff. So it's basically jumpers for goalposts. But it's not kept in good shape. It's basically just like a ploughed furrow the majority of the time. And I think that kind of puts people off. And I don't know, it just doesn't feel like there's as much interest in grassroots football. As much as the FA bang on about how they need to invest in it, if they really needed to invest in it that badly, they would. But they do it through these sort of charitable schemes that seem to do nothing but exclude kids.
Yeah, so it's instead of investing in these crazy backhanded, forward-handed, just weird ways, just go and build a fucking pitch. Just go and build a artificial pitch, a 5-a-side, 11-a-side. Just build these in different areas, make them available, keep them maintained, give the council money and say this is to keep that maintained each month. Anything, just put some actual effort in. But what I want to say is that's the end of tonight's Beyond the Touchline. It's been fascinating the fact that I think within about 15 minutes in we've gone on to this topic and it's run all the way through. So I hope people like this, and if you did, please leave a like, please leave a review if you listen on iTunes or SoundCloud. We're hoping to continue this style of just kind of just running with it. Instead of just reviewing the games, we've just run with it this evening. Matt, you've been fantastic. Really do appreciate you coming on.
No problem.
Colin, as always, very insightful.
Thank you.
And good job, mate. So thanks for listening to Beyond the Touchline.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond the Touchline, a Football Manager Central podcast with your hosts, Paul, Ryan, and Colin. We'll catch you next time.